Greetings and welcome to Growth Hacking Secrets. I'm your host, Mohammed Siddique from Atlanta, Georgia, and the co author of New Success Secrets available on Amazon. On this episode, we have a special guest, Christine McKay. Kristen is the global negotiation strategist, speaker, and author. Please join me to give a warm welcome to our guest, Kristen McKay. Kristen, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you for having me. I really appreciated the invitation. So I'm
Thank you
honored.
so much. Before I ask you the question, what is your negotiation style? I want to know your story. Where were you? What happened? Who you were surrounded with that inspired you to become the negotiation strategist and expert?
Well, I started out as an unwed pregnant teen mom living out of the back of my car. I was homeless for a period of time. Ended up marrying a man who I thought was a nice guy, but he wasn't a nice guy. He wasn't able to support us, and we were on welfare for over 10 years. And I got tired of living that lifestyle, and I ultimately earned my MBA from Harvard University. I started doing negotiation after I finished my undergraduate degree, wherein I did international mergers and acquisitions in Eastern and Western Europe, Southeast Asia, in the telecommunications industry, and I just fell in love with it. And so I've continued to do it. I've built a career of almost 30 years in negotiation. I've negotiated with almost half of the Fortune 500, 67 of the Fortune 100. But I really love working with smaller and mid-sized companies, helping them level the playing field in their negotiation. And so that's what I started Venn Negotiation to do. And that is what we do. We provide educational programs as well as negotiation services where we go in and we negotiate on behalf of our clients.
What is your negotiation style?
Well, my way of thinking about negotiation style is slightly different than what the others, because we've actually developed a quiz to assess people's negotiation styles. So I'm what we call a modern ambassador. So I think the easiest way for me to describe how I think about negotiation, I think about it as an egg. If I had one here, sometimes I have one at my desk, but I think about it as an egg. If I've got to divide the egg in thirds, how do I divide the egg? Most people will say they boil it and they divide it in thirds, or they scramble it and they divide it in thirds. But as somebody who is always looking to create more value, find more opportunities, and level up and create more, I take the egg and I poke a hole in it and I separate the yolk. I drain the yolk and the white, and then I separate the yolk from the white, and I have three different pieces to the egg that have different value to three different people. So that's what negotiation, and that's how I think. And my philosophy on negotiation is negotiation is a conversation about a relationship, and you cannot win a relationship. And so I take that with me into every negotiation I go into.
Wonderful. Kristen, you are not as good as you think. You are better. I can tell you for sure.
I do enjoy it quite immensely.
And you must be talking to yourself many times over the years. I'm talking about you now. I wish you knew it before you got with the wrong husband, I would say, many years ago. So,
Oh yeah, true that. But I've got the right one now, and we've been
yeah,
together.
no, of course, of course,
Yeah,
of course.
I figured it out. I learned from those mistakes. So we'll get into the mistakes in a bit, but
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, that leads to me because everyone need to be learned the negotiation. Does not matter you want to be negotiation expert or not, because the moment you're speaking with someone, you are negotiating. Okay.
absolutely.
In a whole day with the family members, the loved ones, with the kids, and in the business, in a job, salary, everything you are negotiating. When you're
It's
trying to
true.
get the yes or no, depends who you are talking to, you're negotiating. So, Kristen, before we talk about how to do it the right way, what are the top three missteps people do to avoid in a negotiation? In a successful negotiation, what are the top three missteps to avoid?
So the first one is that they're not clear on what they want. And as a result, they're not prepared. And when you're not prepared in the negotiation, you have no opportunities to find creative solutions to the problems that you're trying to solve. So you have to be prepared. The second mistake that people make is that they think that it's all about them. at the negotiation table. And they focus so much on what they want that they don't even think about what their counterpart wants and needs to be successful. There's so much research that shows that if we focus on figuring out how to collaborate and create more by paying attention and listening to each other, then we create more value than if one person takes more of it. And the third thing is what I call intentional listening. Listening is a full body activity. It's a full contact sport, essentially. It requires more than your ears. So asking effective questions and then listening to the response so that you can figure out how to get from point A to point B in a way that creates more value.
Intentional listening. So mistakes people do, they don't intentionally listen, they're just hearing it. Is that right?
Right, exactly. So they'll ask a question and then they're already thinking about how they're anticipating what that response is going to be. And they often are already thinking about how they're going to respond to that anticipated response. And so then when the counterpart says something that they hadn't thought of, it totally throws them and they'll lose that opportunity to go, oh, wait a minute. I hadn't thought of that. And let's play with that a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about that. And so and it's really unfortunate, but I do an exercise when I'm teaching that really helps people understand the importance of being quiet after you ask a question. You ask a question and then the person who asks it cannot say anything for a full minute. And sometimes I'll do it for 3 minutes. And there are times when people are practically jumping across the table because they just, and you can see them lifting out of their seat. They get really fidgety. They start to move their mouth because they just can't. They just want to fill that empty space, that dead air. That dead air is where, because invariably in that exercise, there might be 4 people at the table with you, so a total of 5. Inevitably, that last person doesn't say anything until the last few seconds of that minute. And sometimes it's incredibly profound. And it's like, if you had interrupted or you jumped in, you would have lost the opportunity to hear that insight.
Wonderful. So wonderful. That is amazing. So, however, Kristen, as you mentioned, in early part of your career was not a negotiation expert. It was a completely the opposite. That's most of the people are. So what are your greatest failure in negotiation? What did you learn from it and how did you recover from that failure?
So I think my greatest failure in negotiation for me is I was working on a deal for a client and we were negotiating with one of the largest aerospace defense companies in the world. And we were a smaller company. We're about $120, $150 million in revenue. And they slid their contract across the table and said, we don't negotiate. Now, I don't take that. That's like, I don't play that game. But why it became my greatest failure was because I wasn't able to get my leadership in my client to actually agree to push back on things. So as a negotiator, I constantly have 3 different negotiations going on at the exact same time. I'm negotiating with my client, I'm negotiating with my client's counterpart, and I'm negotiating with myself. Right. Yeah. To make sure that I'm keeping things in my head moving forward. But I wasn't as successful in that situation of negotiating, getting my client to move forward in a way that was going to create as much value for them as there could have been had they been willing to stand firm on some of their their points. And so they agreed to some of the things that this company wanted them to agree to that I did not feel that were in their best long-term interests and financially, and they knew they weren't in their best long-term interests. They just decided to take the calculated risk. And that was very frustrating. When I talked to the counterpart, I said, this goes down in history as the worst deal I have ever negotiated.
So what did you learn from that?
I learned that I need to think when I'm communicating risk to clients, I need to find a way that quantifies it in a way that they understand. It's one thing to say this is high risk, but then you get, you pardon the children's book example, the Chicken Little kind of syndrome, right? The sky is falling kind of thing. And this, I see this happen with attorneys, and I'm not an attorney. I'm a business professional. I negotiate from a profit perspective. But sometimes the topic of risk can be seen by some business leaders as, the minute probability of it happening means that they can ignore it. And figuring out a way to communicate what that risk is and how it impacts operations today, regardless of whether the risk comes to fruition or not, is something that I needed to do more effectively.
Wonderful. That's a great lesson learned. Thank you so much for sharing that one. So let's switch the side. So what are the top 3 success traits for someone who is a successful negotiator? So they see is a real, I win, so what are the top 3 success secrets?
Well, the first one is you have to be curious. You have to be curious about yourself, and you have to be curious about your counterpart. And if you're not curious, you will not be able to achieve optimal deal outcomes, because it is in that curiosity that you discover alternatives. The second thing is to focus not just on the short term, but the long term. Negotiation is a conversation about relationships, and a relationship, even if you're dissolving a relationship, that's still a relationship, and that relationship still has impact over time, right? Yeah. So, and the reason for dissolving it, and negotiation is a hopeful act. We believe we negotiate because we think that what we do today together is going to make us better in the future. So don't forget the future in your negotiation, and don't get so stuck in the past that you drag it into the present and then ignore the opportunities that could be down the road. So, and then the third one is really, know when to say no. Don't be afraid of the word no. No is an invitation to ask more questions in business. No is it gives us our boundaries within which we operate. Every relationship has boundaries. Every relationship has conflict. And so don't be afraid of that, but be willing to say when something isn't working for you. And that will take the quality of your relationships, the strength of the relationships, and it'll expand them significantly further.
I want to take this opportunity to ask a question. Let's say you ask me something, you trying to sell me something, and I try to negotiate something, and I say no. What's a follow-up question I should ask to kind of carry on the conversation?
A lot of times I'll say, well, what exactly are you saying no to?
That's a good one.
And then you say nothing.
Yeah.
And then you shut up. And you listen.
Yeah.
And then you listen.
Yeah, and do the intentional listening, okay?
Exactly. Because a lot of times when somebody says no, they're not saying no to the whole thing. There's something specific about what you have said that they're reacting to. So when you say, what specifically are you saying no to, you're forcing them or encouraging them to divulge kind of and become more transparent in the conversation, which helps you figure out how to solve the problem.
I usually ask, I'm just sharing with you, I love it, so I encourage them to say no. They already said it. I just embrace their no base. They say, what? It's like, it's shocking. I'm not even concerned about your no. By the way, just curious how you come up with that conclusion. I asked them how you come up with that conclusion. I don't want to use the word no anymore in the question,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And as long as I can get a list of things the idea is to get them to give me a list of things, right?
Yeah,
if I have a list, then I can figure out what in that list, and how does the way you ask that question does essentially the same thing.
Yeah, I say just curious, always be curious, just curious how you come up with that conclusion. If it doesn't even these go through, that's okay. I can learn how people, when they say no, but I can minimize my objection and learn from that and use it on the next call somewhere,
Exactly. Now, one thing not to ask them is why. Don't say why not. Do not say why. Don't say why. Why makes people very defensive. Yeah. So avoid why. but
Yeah.
ask, what or how, like you do. So, but
Okay.
yeah, those would be my three big ones. So.
Oh, wonderful. This is good. This is good. How the growth hacking secrets community people are watching this now can support you.
Well, I have a new podcast coming out on the 16th of March.
Yay!
Yeah, I'm very excited. I've recorded 30 episodes already.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited about that. You can check us out at vennegotiation.com, where we have information about the podcast. My first book is coming out soon, called Why Not Ask? A Conversation About Getting More. It's available for pre-order, and you can check out our programs. So yeah.
Yeah, Chris was my mentor. Here's a big competition coming your way.
Yeah, Chris and I do different things. I'd love to meet him in person. I'd love to interview him on my show, because we have very different approaches in some regards and very different experience. I could never negotiate a hostage crisis situation, but I don't know that he could negotiate a multi-billion-dollar transaction either. So
Oh, yeah. How imagine working with both of you at the same time? So learn everyone has
I
a
think we'd be a power duo.
yeah, wonderful. Kristen, I really appreciate the time together and everything. Thank you so much for sharing. And I say, you know what? Yeah, what you're saying no to, I am going to use that one. So I learned something new from you today. So, Kristen, we are about to wrap up. I'd like to get your feedback on being a guest experience on the show. What would you say about your today's guest experience on a growth hacking secret show?
Well, the first and most important thing about being on any show is that I have fun doing it. And you have made this a really great experience. I have really enjoyed getting to meet you, and I'm really honored to be a guest on the show. This has been fun, and I look forward to establishing a long-term relationship.
Thank you so much for your kind words. I really appreciate it. What would you say as a final word?
Just keep in mind, whether you love even if you love negotiation, you might not actually be very good at it. And as I know a lot of those, and if you hate negotiation, you actually might be better at it than you think you are. And so, think about negotiation. When you think about negotiation as that conversation about a relationship, it gives you the latitude to change how you interact. It gives you the latitude to change how you ask for help and ask for support and tell people when things aren't working right. And so I just encourage you to kind of make that slight change in how you think about negotiation. And I think you'll see a lot of more success than you've already achieved.
Wonderful. Kristen, McKay, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today on the behalf of Growth Hacking Secrets community and our entire team. We really appreciate you. This is Mohammed Siddique signing off from Atlanta, Georgia. Until the next episode, all good wishes.